A young girl's foray into the supernatural proves fatal. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today is Short Story Tuesday, so I want to talk about an interesting short story as well as one with a bit of a horror theme because it is Spooktober. So today's short story is all about sin and witchcraft, potentially. I am referring to The White People by Arthur Machen. I don't know how to pronounce that. Which was published in 1904 in Horlick's Magazine. For those who don't know, Arthur Machen was a Welsh author who lived in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He was known for writing horror in particular, although I think he wrote a number of other books and short stories and things like that. He's widely considered one of the sort of like big names in horror, especially in the early 1900s, earning a lot of supporters, including H.P. Lovecraft, who I think was also inspired by the short story that I talked about last week, The Night Wire. So a lot of inspiration there. Machen was also a bit of a pagan and was involved in pagan circles in England during the 1900s. And he also seemed to be a supporter of Francisco Franco, who was the dictator who ran Spain from the 1920s until the 1960s, which is not ideal. It's weird that he would be, in support of that, given how destructive Francisco Franco was. But he's dead now, so he can't cause more harm with his weird support of fascist leaders. A very interesting kind of writer. This is the first time I really encountered his writing, and as you'll find out, I wasn't really a fan of what I read, but I do think it's still worth talking about here. So without further ado, let's talk about The White People. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The White People focuses on Ambrose and Cotgrave. They are just two men who are chatting. Cotgrave decided to stop in on Ambrose. Ambrose seems to be a homebody who is a bit of a peculiar character, and he might even be crazy. I think that's what Cotgrave has said about him. Sorry, not Cotgrave, Cotgrave. My apologies. As they're talking about sin and murder and things like that and the nature of evil, Ambrose gives Cotgrave a book, a green book that was apparently written by a young girl. It's basically her diary. And in the diary, which the story just kind of goes into, the girl writes about strange lands, the supernatural with nymphs and various rituals and things like that, kings and queens, and even witchcraft. And it suggests this girl might be engaging in witchcraft, but doesn't outright say it. It just kind of ends before it gets to that point. And then as the story shifts back to Cotgrave and Ambrose, Cotgrave notes that the story is very queer, and I think essentially what he's saying is, this is what the hell was that? Why did you make me read that? And Ambrose goes on to say that he and others found the girl dead by a pagan statue in the woods, and that she apparently poisoned herself over time. Because of her connection to the supernatural or something like that. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there is a little bit worth talking about with this short story. One of the themes that or ideas or techniques that Machen is using is that of the framing device. Because the story is presented about Cotgrave and Ambrose, but it goes into another story within that story, which is the young girl's diary, which talks about all those the strange witchcraft and the supernatural creatures and the kings and queens and things like that. I guess we're meant to see a connection between those two things, much like how the play within a play in Hamlet was meant to sort of out Hamlet's uncle as the murderer of his father. But although that's much better written in Shakespeare, whereas here I feel like what Ambrose and Cotgrave are saying isn't as strongly as connected. Like it's barely connected to the diary that we're having or we're being made to read, because they're talking about sinning and evil. And I don't necessarily think that what the young girl is talking about is evil. She's talking about the supernatural. Is our Ambrose and Cotgrave, highlighting how the supernatural and witchcraft are evil things and how it can be so easy to slip into it. I do think that might be what Machen is trying to say, but I don't think he's very effective in connecting those two ideas. And so it just feels like two disconnected ideas that are told at the same time in this story. But Machen is also talking about our ventures into the supernatural, and how, what could be simple at first of just like doing these pagan rituals, of maybe mixing potions together and reading about this sort of thing. Like it's harmless at first until it becomes more than that, because the young girl in the story is doing something very simple at first, but they eventually find her at this pagan statue and she's poisoned herself. Like, she's become a true believer of all of the supernatural stuff. It's no longer harmless. She's actually gotten herself killed. And I do think that's kind of fascinating how, death by degrees or something like that, where it doesn't happen all at once, it happens over time, and before you know it, you become a cultist or something like that. That does sound interesting, but at the same time, this also feels like a bit of a moral panic. Like, oh my goodness, our young people are, worshiping old gods or something like that. They're engaging in these pagan rituals and getting themselves killed in the process. Somebody must do something, which feels a bit weird coming from a man like Machen, who is apparently a pagan himself. I don't quite get it, but maybe that's not what he's trying to say, but it certainly comes off as that way in the story. Now, there are other critics and whatnot. As I was trying to get a better understanding of the story, I found out that, Lovecraft likes this story, and other people have kind of cited, how it feels similar to, like, The Color Out of Space, or one of the many other, like, the Dunwich Horror, one of the many other, stories that sort of document a journey into an insane location that's being filled with monsters or other horrifying things. And that does kind of feel like the same here, but I feel like what those stories give right is a character is documenting their own journey, whereas these two people are reading about another girl's journey into that. And it is kind of spooky and a little scary, but at the same time, it's not, because, again, those two characters have nothing to do with the girl overall. Like Ambrose found the body and whatnot, but that's not scary. Like, everybody finds bodies somewhere, not really, but people can find bodies anywhere. That doesn't necessarily make it a scary thing. So I do think Machen is trying to do that, but I don't think he has as much talent here, or like he's not as successful as Lovecraft has been. So you end up with a bit of a half story, I feel. Like, there's a lot of potential here, but I don't think all of the ideas are connected, and what you end up with is just something that feels like it's rambling more so than anything else. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The White People by Arthur Machen, which is It's just a subpar short story, a subpar horror short story. I feel like there are much better ones out there, but it's still important to talk about, a lot of the different authors that people might not know, and especially given that Machen is a popular author, it's important to actually examine what he's written and try to better understand it. If you think differently, or you simply want to comment on my review here, let me know in the comments below. I'll put a link to this story in the description as well, so feel free to give me some feedback, or just let me know what you thought of the story too. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this author or this story if they don't know about those things. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and pagan-based travels. Farewell.